Hey everyone, welcome to Girls Can, a series of podcasts created to help educate and inform young women throughout the world. Our goal is to empower and inspire the next generation because the girls of today become the future leaders of tomorrow. Hey guys, welcome to Girls Can. I'm Brooke Swain, and today I'm sitting here with Elizabeth Swain.
Hi.
And Miss Stacy Wellborn.
Hello.
Miss Stacy, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, I would love to. I am, by profession, a marketing and PR professional, so I work in the communications field. I have my own company. I'm a consultant, so I work with a number of clients to help them communicate to the world to accomplish their business goals. I also am a co-owner of a co-working space, which is actually where we're sitting today, here in Deep Fried Studios at Container Yard, and I teach at Spring Hill College.
So, Miss Stacy, would you mind telling us a little bit about your media class at Spring Hill College?
I teach a class called Advertising, Media, Planning, and Effectiveness, and basically we talk about how an organization wants to communicate a message, whatever that message may be, how to use media effectively. And it's really about what's the business problem, what are we trying to accomplish, who's the target audience, and how do we do that most effective budget-wise and communication-wise.
What are some of the opportunities that your students have had as a result of your class?
I also teach another class. That one's a newer one for me. I also teach in the spring. It's called Principles of Strategic Communications, which is kind of an overview of what is marketing, what is PR, what is advertising, and what roles can you play in that field. And I have a lot of students who've come out of that class who are interning in different businesses here in town while they're in school, and then subsequently go on to jobs. I had one student who became the social media manager for Zatarain Foods, so she got to talk about food all the time, which is great. I have another working for an insurance company. I've got a couple at ad agencies, just a whole host of things. That's one of the things I love about communications as a field is it's really broad, and you learn the fundamentals of how best to communicate can be applied to any industry.
So, what are some of the key takeaways that you tell your students are the most important things you need to know about social media?
Again, I think we always start with what is the business? What are they trying to accomplish? And who's the target audience? And so a lot of times when I meet with clients about social media, they'll say, oh, I need to be on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat and blah, 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 blah. And I bring the conversation back around to, again, what are you trying to accomplish and who are you targeting? Because not everyone is on every social media. Particularly students in college are real involved in Snapchat, which I don't know. Are y'all on Snapchat?
I used to be. Not anymore.
I'm not. No. And I'm on it, but I honestly I just don't get it. It's too busy. It's too much work. But a lot of college students, at least the ones that I communicate or am around, use Snapchat a lot. Well, when you look at the data, Snapchat's user base is 1/10 of Facebook's. So if you're going to use your time wisely and your target audience is 40-year-old women, those women aren't on Snapchat. So although you're a 20-year-old female and may be really active in Snapchat, but your business problem is targeting women who are 40, they're on Facebook. So spend your time and energy on Facebook, not Snapchat. Now, if I'm targeting 20-year-old college students, then yes, I probably would use Snapchat as a medium through which to communicate. So it's really looking at what makes sense. Again, what's the business problem and who's the target audience? And not being biased by your own personal experience, right? Because you have an iPhone, you think everybody has an iPhone. Well, iPhone doesn't have the largest market share. Really, Samsung and Android is much bigger. But, again, if I make decisions based on what I do, that's not necessarily best for my client.
Right. Has there been a time in your career when you've tried to target a specific audience and it hasn't worked and you've tried a new way? Or how do you find what your audience is interested in?
A lot of research. So the good thing is of course, social media has been around 10 plus years now. So 8, 9, 10 years ago when it was just starting, there wasn't a lot of data to support that. But now there's a ton of data. And so through industry magazines and publications and websites, I keep up with the trends. And then through either researching, if a company comes to me and says, hey, we want to be on Facebook and we want to target 40-year-old women, I'm always asking questions like, well, who is your audience already? Who are you selling to? Like if you have a store or wherever you're located, or are you a catalog or a website, there's data everywhere. And so use that to help target. And then sometimes it doesn't work, and sometimes you just have to go with your gut and say, well, I think this is how this is supposed to work. Well, maybe I need to tweak it a little bit. Let's try something over here. So I think it's important to do your research, make a plan, go for it, but then also be willing to adapt along the way.
That's really interesting. So as a professional, a woman in a professional field, have you ever felt like you've had any challenges you've had to face? And what would be some advice you'd give to some women who are facing similar challenges, particularly in a marketing field?
Yes, lots is the simple answer to the question. I think a lot of times I've been working now 20 years. Let's just call it about. And one of my early experiences at an ad agency taught me a very valuable lesson, which is, well, it's kind of negative what I'm going to say, but it turns around positive, is that people don't always tell you the truth. And I was in a position where I thought that I had an opportunity to grow and move into another position. And subsequently, my male boss hired his male best friend for that position. So I kind of got edged out. But I had been strung along and done a whole lot of work to work towards that position. So fortunately, that happened early. And so what I learned from that was to ask more questions and to be more clear and to understand and set expectations. And then also just to watch out for myself and not necessarily trust everything somebody says is the case. That sometimes there's motivations that you don't always see. So I look now more for those types of things, kind of the relationships of the way people treat others, which is that old adage of don't necessarily believe what people say, but believe what they do. Sometimes they'll say something, but do something else. Trust the do more than the say.
That's really true. So you are very successful in the communications field and in your work field, but you also do a lot of community service outside of your work. Would you mind telling us a little bit about Focus?
Yes, I definitely believe in giving back to the community and have been honored to be involved in the Focus Women's Conference here in Mobile, Alabama. We had our first conference last October. We're currently planning, it was last September. This coming October is the second Focus Women's Conference. And the founder, Devin Ford, I met through some networking, and she invited me to be involved, and I loved it. And to see 250 women come together and for a day of learning and support, energy was amazing, and I'd love for y'all to come. I think as we expand this year, we really want to have more students come and be a part of that because much like your goal, I want to help young women grow and be successful and see positive, strong role model women.
Yeah, we would definitely love to come.
Good. We'll plan on it.
So you've talked about empowering women and mentoring young girls. What's one piece of advice that you would give a young girl like Elizabeth or I
think getting comfortable in your own skin is very important. And we, from a society standpoint, are bombarded all the time with reasons why we're not perfect, right? But we are all perfect in our own ways. And having that confidence and being comfortable in your voice. I also have found over the years that sometimes I didn't have the confidence to speak up or to speak for myself. And therefore, much like the incident I mentioned earlier, I didn't speak up when that happened. Like I just said, oh, okay, well, I guess I'm not worth it or whatever. It was all about how maybe I wasn't that right. But really, the older I've gotten, the farther I've gotten away from it, really that boss kind of handled that wrong. But at the time, I didn't have the confidence to speak up. So I think getting comfortable with your voice, literally your voice, and not shying away from speaking up is the best thing that you can do. But build confidence, build your knowledge, because knowledge is confidence. The more you know, the stronger you feel about something, the more easily you are going to speak about it, right? And use your voice. Don't shy away from it. Like you guys are using your voice on your podcast. That's awesome.
That's very powerful. Did you have a role model or someone that taught you about the importance of using your voice?
My grandmother is probably the most important female role model for me, really any male or female. She was born in 1919, so almost 100 years ago. She died in 2009 when she was 90. But she graduated from high school when she was 16 in Louisiana, southern town, small town, went to the state capital to go to college, and was working by the time she was 19. And then she volunteered for what now is the Peace Corps, but it was not that at the time because this was in the 40s and went to the Panama Canal and worked. And she's a single woman at 20 years old in the Panama Canal from small town Louisiana. She ended up meeting my grandfather there. They came home. She raised a family, and then my grandfather died early, and she had 4 young children. And so she started renovating houses. Like, she was one of the early flippers, and so she bought houses and renovated them and sold them. And that's how she built her income, which was, decent when she passed. But she was always strong, Oh, even now it makes me get a little upset. She just always said you can do anything you want, don't let anybody hold you back. And I appreciate that. Sorry. I can't believe it's been 9 years and I still get upset.
No, She sounds like a really amazing woman.
She was great. Yeah. She was great. I loved her.
What do you think a good book for any teenage girl might be, for like something every single teenage girl should read before they go off to college?
Have y'all heard of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People?
No, never.
So it's a gentleman named Stephen Covey, and he wrote the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I believe there's a teen version of that book. Either way, the one I read was the original book, so it's probably 30 years old. But it is a values-based model for running your life, basically. And it is what I would recommend to y'all or to anyone to read. It's an oldie but goodie, and it's really just about, understanding. One of the principles is seek first to understand. And if you do that in everything you do, learn about people, ask questions, understand their why, like why do they do what they do, will help you communicate with them in the future, with anybody, right? I mean, we all come from we're based on our experiences, we're based on our values and our family and our education. But why do you do the thing that you do? Well, if I know why you do what you do, then it's much easier for me to talk with you, to encourage you to do things, or if I need you to do something for me, if I know why you do what you do, I can use that to get you to do what I want you to do, right? Mm-hmm. So it works both ways. So I think listening and asking good questions and understanding why people who are who they are is key. And that's, for me, that foundation comes from that book.
Has there been a time when you've met someone that you wouldn't have met otherwise, and that you've asked a lot of questions and learned more about someone that you wouldn't have known otherwise?
Oh, certainly, all the time. It's hard because I always want to go into these conversations, like deep conversations, but you don't always have that kind of time. So not always do I get to do that, but sometimes I'll say, hey, can we follow up? I think you're really an interesting person, and let's go have lunch. Let's go have coffee, and I just want to learn about you. Tell me who you are. Where do you come from? Why are you who you are? People also are very flattered by that because we don't always take time to learn about people, particularly in today's social media. I mean, think about Facebook. What do I know about anybody? I know what they did yesterday or maybe where they work, but Facebook and social media has only made that worse. So the more that we can sit down and have real conversations with each other, I think the better off we all are.
So I'm sure that you were talking about earlier about how to get to know people and ask a lot of questions, and I'm sure it can be a little challenging at first, and it can be not scary, but sometimes you run the risk of being turned down. So how do you maintain that confidence and that poise in unfamiliar situations? That's
a great question, and you might not expect this, but do you know the terms introverted and extroverted?
Yes.
What those mean? And are you familiar with the Myers-Briggs personality test? So on the Myers-Briggs test, I'm an introvert.
Me too.
And a lot of people don't think that about me because I say I'm an introvert who knows how to be extroverted. But it's taken me a long time. Like, I was a really shy kid, I really didn't come out of my shell until late college. But what I have learned, if I go into a situation where I don't know anyone, I always go into it with thinking, I've got to have at least one question I can ask somebody to start a conversation. And I guess the one piece of advice I would give you is always ask an open-ended question. Don't ask a yes-no question. So how are you, not even how are you, but tell me about yourself, or what do you do for fun? So those types of things. So I always know I've got a safe question if I get into a spot where I don't know someone or I don't know what to say. I just ask a general question because, again, it gets them talking about who they are, and people love to talk about who they are.
So I'm just curious, what's your Myers-Briggs personality type?
I am an INTJ.
Really? I am an INTJ too.
Are you really?
Yes, ma'am.
Wow, that's cool.
I need to take that test. I'm not really sure what I am.
So an introvert, extrovert, oftentimes we think of it as a social skill, but it really has more to do with how you get your energy. So when you're exhausted, do you get energy by resting and being quiet by yourself, or do you get energy being around others? Like when I'm tired, I need to go and be by myself and just chill and nothing, right? But I have friends who, when they are tired, they want to go to a party because that's what energizes them. So it isn't so much about how we communicate, like shy, right? It's really more about how do you recharge your batteries. And so that helps me think through that, because I am now not as shy, although I am still sort of shy. I mean, there's still times I get nervous, particularly going to business things where I don't know a soul, but you just put a smile on your face and find another person who's smiling and then ask an open-ended question and start the conversation.
So have you ever had any introverts in your class, and what did you do to make them feel more comfortable?
I always have introverts in my class. And so what I try to do is I like to teach like a conversation. I have to use PowerPoints and those types of things because you've got to communicate facts and stuff. But really, I think if you were to ask my students, my class is more about a conversation. And so in that, though, I have to intentionally, certain students, I have to ask them questions to get them to participate. Otherwise they're just going to sit there and not say a word for 6 weeks. And but I want it to be, and I tell them that up front too. I said, this class is a conversation. This isn't a lecture. We are going to talk because it's real world. I mean, communications is real world. You see commercials and advertising messages all day, every day. And my goal for them when they come out of this class is that they look at the world differently and they say, I wonder why Mountain Dew did that commercial, or I wonder why Wendy's promotes that, or I wonder why Toyota does something different than Lexus. Whatever that is, really look at why are they doing what they do, and it's usually because they're targeting somebody different from who you are. I look at some of these Mountain Dew commercials, and they are wacky, and I'm like, what is that? But they're not targeting me, They're targeting some, skateboarding 24-year-old California dude. That's not me. So, of course, it seems weird to me, but it works for what they're doing, right? And it goes back to that research and what you're trying to accomplish.
I read this book. It's called Presence by Amy Cuddy. She's a professor at Harvard, and she's a psychologist. And she always talks about even if you don't feel confident, to fake it until you become it.
That's right.
Do you tell your students the same thing?
I do. I'll tell anybody that I talk to about that. In fact, we talked about community earlier. I'm also involved in Junior League of Mobile. And before our podcast, was meeting with some ladies who are leaders in the organization, new leaders. And I said, even if you don't know the answer, you've got to fake it till you make it, or study. You got to study, and you've got to know more than the person across the table from you. So if you're getting challenged on something, then you need to study and be prepared for anything that can come your way. And that will help. That knowledge will help you be more confident. But if you go into a situation that you don't have the information, what do you feel like? You don't feel confident. So have the information. Just do the homework. In today's world, it's not that hard. Some things don't change. Y'all have to do your homework to be prepared for class. I'm 45 years old, and I have to do my homework to be prepared for a meeting. It's still the same thing. You just got to be prepared.
Has there been a time when you put yourself out there and you failed? And if so, did you learn something from it? Definitely.
Probably my biggest failure would be I actually opened a restaurant in Austin, Texas.
Oh.
This was it was 2003, so 15 years ago. Not a lot of folks know that I have done that. And it was a big restaurant, and it was a big undertaking. I had a huge staff. And after about 18 months, I decided to shut it down, and we just closed the doors. And I learned so much from that experience. I mean, we'd be here for days. But mostly it was some of the things that I've told you already. It's understanding people's motivations, asking people why they do what they do. Particularly in dealing with employees, it's important to know what motivates them. Take people for what they do, not necessarily what they say. I certainly learned that. I also learned to know my numbers, to know the business, to understand the target audience, providing a product that the people want. I mean, I learned so many things in that process, but I also learned to not, how do I say it? It's like with Container Yard, which is our newest business here. I could have spent $50,000 to $100,000 to build this place and taken a loan out and whatever it is. But because of my experience with the restaurant, which ultimately we built too big, too fast, what I have learned is to take baby steps. And so rather than go get a business loan and spend a whole lot of money on this place that we didn't know if it'd work or not, we bootstrapped it, and we have 4 partners who each put in some cash, and we opened this place with less than $20,000. And now we're here 2 years later. We're very successful. We're making money. It's not a lot of money, but we've proved the model before just jumping in. Right. And I think that's probably the biggest lesson I learned from the restaurant experience. We invested $500,000, and 18 months later it was gone. Mm-hmm. And I learned a lot of things along the way, but certainly now when I look at a new project, it's how do I take a baby step to prove it, to make sure it works before I invest a whole lot of money.
So you set little goals for yourself, and then eventually they become something much bigger.
That's right.
Does it sometimes get frustrating, or sometimes do you feel like you're getting impatient because it's such a tiny goal and you have this big vision for the future?
That's a great question. And yes, and so one of the things that I also believe in is celebrating little wins. Take baby steps. Well, every time you take that step and it's successful, celebrate it. And then take the next one, and then take the next one. I used to be a perfectionist, and so I would say, okay, I have to do this thing, and I have this really big, bold goal, and this is the way I'm going to get to that goal. Well, then if I would get off the path and it not work out, I would beat myself up about it. Well, now I have more of a broader vision. I may say, hey, I have this really great goal. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to get there, but I'm going to enjoy the process. So I used to be about the destination and not the process, and I've sort of flipped that to be more about the process. It's important to have a vision and a goal, but don't get so locked into it that you don't enjoy the path. Be flexible, see what comes. I also try not to force things, because in the past I would say, well, I'm going to force it and make this happen. I can make this happen. I can do anything, which is true. But sometimes if you let things happen, the things you need will come along. And so if I take a baby step and I'm not exactly sure what the next baby step is, somebody may come into my life and say, hey, here's the help you need to take that next step. Well, if I wasn't open to that opportunity, I wouldn't have seen it. Or if I was so focused on the destination, I would have blinders on and not see these opportunities as they're coming. And so if you're more open-minded, again, have the vision, work hard, move in that direction, but be willing to zig and zag along the way.
That's great advice. What advice would you give to a young girl who maybe didn't know what her goals should be or what path she should take?
Well, your parents might not want to hear this, but I believe in education. So I think if you're particularly in high school, I think college is a great option, but it's not necessarily for everybody. So for someone who doesn't necessarily know, maybe take a year off and go travel or go work or do a mission, whatever it is, do something to explore. But if college is, because some parents say you have to go to college, right? And I believe college is awesome, and I love school. Go to liberal arts. I think that's something I wish I had done. I wish I had gone to a small school with liberal arts education. What I love teaching at Spring Hill is it's a liberal arts education. We obviously are talking about communication and marketing, which is a profession. But at the same time, they're taking religion and ethics and world history, and that only makes you a better person, right? You're a better communicator if you know more about the world. You're a better communicator if you know more about spirituality and ethics. I went to Alabama, which I had a great experience, loved it, but it was more traditional, and it was a straight path, and that's what you do. Again, I was a perfectionist. I finished college in 3 years and was sorority president, and I worked. I did it all, which is ridiculous. I look back and go, why was I in such a hurry? Mm-hmm. Which is kind of back to my earlier, be willing to zig and zag. Right? I was so focused on getting that degree and accomplishing that goal that I didn't stop to smell the roses. I had fun, but I also worked my butt off. Looking back, I wish I'd taken that extra year and enjoyed it a little bit more.
How do you balance different aspects of your life, and how do you prioritize with all of your activities that you're involved with?
Don't ask my husband that question either. It's hard. I'm not going to lie, it's hard. I don't have children, so that's something that doesn't take a lot of my time, and most of my friends do, but that wasn't in the cards for me. I have dogs. They're easy, you can feed them and go for 8 hours and not have to worry about them. But, obviously my priority has to be my work and my clients because that's how I make money. If I could be a volunteer all day, every day, I would totally do it. But I'm changing my priorities right now to school. And so I'm actually about to start a PhD program.
Really?
So I told you I love school.
Wow.
So I'm going to go back to school in May to work towards a doctorate so that I can teach full time.
That's fantastic.
That's really exciting.
Yeah, thanks. I'm very excited. I hadn't really even told anybody. So,
What's your doctorate going to be in?
In marketing. I will be at South Alabama and hopefully learn to do a lot more asking of why and doing some research as to, why communications and marketing works and really understanding that more robustly.
Since you're in communications, you probably have a really good grasp of social media. What do you think are some of the benefits and some of the disadvantages of social media in today's society?
Well, I think it's allowed us to not talk to each other directly, right? I mean, it's just, again, it's easy to keep up on Facebook with what my high school friends are doing. Well, I need to call them, or my aunts and uncles, or my old friends in Austin where I used to live. I see what they're up to on Facebook. You know what? I haven't called that friend in years. That's, I think, the downfall of it. The benefit of it is I think that it has allowed us to communicate more community messages. I have a friend through Junior League whose house burned to the ground 2 days ago.
Oh, no.
And they're all fine, but she's a large family. And you know what? Within 12 hours, all of this support has flooded in for them. And so that, to me, is a benefit of social media, is that when someone's in need, we have this network. I mean, I had a friend in Birmingham. So I shared my friend's post. She has 8 children, so she needed a lot of clothing.
Wow.
And I had a friend from Birmingham message me, a friend from Atlanta message me, and several here, of course, in town who were like, what can I do and where do I send it? That is amazing. That's the power of social media. But we do have to be careful because it allows for a free flow of opinions. It seems like, which is good. But the challenge of that, right, is that people will say things on social media that they wouldn't say to your face. So I think we've lost some of that.
It's very true.
One of the things I would like to know from you is, how do you use social media and what do you think are the pros and cons?
I am not like the typical teenager. I just got an Instagram account a few months ago to keep up with friends. I just got a Facebook, but I don't have Snapchat, and I'm not really very involved with social media.
Good for you.
I check the news a lot. I like looking at the online web sources. I think it's a responsibility. I think it can be it's a very powerful way, like you said, to spread messages. Last year, we took on this big endeavor to raise money for a place called St. Mary's Home, and Facebook was a very powerful tool in getting the message out. But I also think it can be a distraction. But definitely. I think it's really important to be able to use social media responsibly because it can be a really powerful tool when you use it in the correct way.
And it can be a powerful tool when you don't use it correctly, right? I mean, think of all the shaming that happens. Honestly, I can't imagine being y'all in this world of social media. I mean, your age. I mean, when I was your age, we didn't have all that. Now, to think of, the danger that happens when people share inappropriate things and it's hurtful, and there's all the bullying that happens on social media. My goodness, you just said it. It's being responsible, and I think not enough parents teach their kids to be responsible when it comes to social media. They just say, "Oh, sure, go have a Facebook page, go have a Snapchat," but don't ever have a conversation about how dangerous it can be and hurtful.
Right. I do think it does have a lot of advantages, but especially with just teenagers in general, and when they use Instagram, I don't think people realize how exclusive it can be and how it can really hurt someone's feelings at the same time. They post a picture of this big party everyone was invited to, and then people go on there and look, and then they weren't invited, and it hurts their feelings. I do think it's a great way to organize things. Some of my friends, we have group Snapchats sometimes when I used to have it, and we'd organize things that way, and you could include more people in a group Snapchat than in a group text, which was really nice. And it's a faster way to communicate with people. And it's a great way to spread messages, like Elizabeth was saying, with our fundraising. But there's definitely a downside to it. You could spend hours looking on Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, and instead of doing something else more productive with your time, like reading a book or finishing your homework. So.
Well, and I recently had a conversation with a friend who's early 20s, young lady. Well, and I should say a mutual friend of this young person said to me, if she doesn't get 100 likes on Instagram, she feels like she's failed. And I thought, oh my gosh, so your confidence is based on how many people like your Instagram post? That worries me.
Right.
You know, I mean, seriously, that's not what your identity should be wrapped up in. There are so many concerns around social media, and I think it's what you said, Elizabeth, again, it's being responsible. We've just got to be careful, you know, and so from a teaching perspective, again, I tell my students, when you get out of college and you go work for somebody, because you're young, they're going to be like, oh, hey, you're young, you can do Facebook, here, do my business Facebook page. If you just have used it personally, using Facebook and social media for a business is a very different tactic than personal, right? Your language has to change. It has to be more strategic. Again, what's the business problem? Who's the target audience? What am I trying to communicate? That's a different strategy than me saying, oh, I had a great time at St. Patrick's yesterday. You have to really change the way you think about social media. So again, it's a great tool, but you have to be intentional about it.
Kind of like this podcast series, a way to use media in a positive way to reach other girls.
That's right. All new technology has pros and cons. It's how you use it. And you're right. You guys are using this new technology. You saw an issue with getting people together. Well, let's take that out. Let's provide it in another medium. That's awesome. You guys, I'm so proud and impressed by y'all.
Thank you.
We've loved getting to talk to you. You're an amazing woman, and it's so great that other girls have a chance to hear your story and your advice.
I feel like I've learned so much from this conversation, and I know other people will too.
Well, thank you all for having me. It's quite an honor.
We've enjoyed I wasn't sure if you was going to say something or I was going to say something. We've enjoyed having you. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
This has been Girls Can, a podcast and an organization dedicated to improving the lives of young women in our community.
We want to encourage young women to make a difference through education and service.
Because the girls of today become the future leaders of tomorrow. Because the girls of today become the future leaders of tomorrow.